In this episode, I will walk back to some of the general findings of the research project on river metamorphosis due to human intervention funded by the Ministry of Environment and Forests during 1983 and to 86. This project was implemented from the Department of Geology of the University of Kerala. Well, when Stanley Shum coined the term river metamorphosis, his intention was to highlight the river basin changes due to changes in climate. In other words, most of the large rivers of the world have been in existence or in operation right from the Cretaceous or even earlier. And the rivers of Kerala that rise from the Western Ghats and flowing toward the Lakshadweep Sea are no exception, because this terrain, the highland terrain, the mountainous tract of the Western Ghats in the state of Kerala is also quite old, in the sense, roughly the southern Kerala mountain ridges or the rock formation, they are, I'm not saying they are Precambrian, that's it. So there was a study by Rajiv Nigam of the National Institute of Oceanography, which stated that the proto-monsoon climate had settled in Kerala right from the mid-Paleozoic. In other words, Kerala had been enjoying this kind of monsoon climate. Proto-monsoon means, this like what we have now. There are no, two parts of the monsoon: the advancing monsoon, which is the southwest monsoon, and the retreating monsoon, which is the northeast monsoon. That happened only after or in the post-Cretaceous, when peninsular India just got very close to what it's where it occurs now on their surface. In other words, once the peninsular India came northward and eschewed the Sea of Tethys and the sediments in the Sea of Tethys and created the Himalayas, then onwards, we have the so-called advancing and retreating monsoon. This is the kind of hypothesis or the proposal made in a paper by Rajiv Nigam and his team. So what I mean to say is, our rivers in Kerala are quite antique geologically also. Most of our general public, not even most of our people do not know or do not worry about the antiquity of the Earth's surface or Earth's surface features, especially when it comes to our own land area in Kerala. Because it doesn't affect them directly or indirectly. Unfortunately, that was kind of belief. This is partly due to the kind of education that is that our people are exposed to. Only a group of geologists alone are familiar with the geological processes. So now here, I have to make a distinction. Okay, I use the word river metamorphosis in a different context. In other words, it is a river metamorphosis caused not by the kind of climate shift. Instead, it is by the what is called the whatever was done during the Anthropocene, that is the last 4,000 years, by the humans. In other words, humans were very closely attached to the natural resources. As they evolved and they got more civilized, the extent of exploitation of the natural resources also consequently grew. So all the resources, the resources that we are taking out of the natural system of the earth are not replaceable. We can always go about planting 8 trillion trees in order to, stop the climate change. But what happens is, if we have taken out some rock, taken out some soil, taken out some, sediment or channel sand, river channel sand, and used it for some other purpose, the system lost this permanently forever. Another interesting point, our scientific community in India, as Kerala in particular, do not appreciate is that the time taken for formation of 1 meter of soil. Well, it is a very difficult thing or proposition to get the exact dates for the formation of soil, because the datable materials in the soil profile is very little or non-existent. However, we have had some kind of experience in measuring the extent of soil erosion in the geologic past in various continents. India is no exception. So there is what we have called this kind of erosion in the geologic past is as geologic erosion. And we have to make a distinction between why erosion I emphasized, because unless the soil is made ready to be eroded by the rainwater or a glacier or a wind, the erosion process will not take place. And what is the prerequisite? You have to have a soil, a cover of soil. Well, this cover of soil is actually the most important resource that we have, the humanity has now, for raising crops, raising agricultural crops for food and trade and commerce. And also, this is something that holds a huge number of microorganisms that are useful to the humanity in the long run as well as in the short run. So if the soil is eroded, soil is a material otherwise compared to rock, readily available for erosion by the rainwater, by the raindrops hitting the soil surface, so on and so forth. One of the things that will prevent the excessive erosion of the soil is actually the tree cover. As far as our forests are concerned, the forests are called shola forests. They are, tropical, wet, evergreen, etc., is all fine. But there is forest can grow only when there is a soil cover. That is the exact reason that our Western Ghats at the tallest point is covered with only bare rock. And only thing that grew on it was during the monsoons, during the wet season, algae, that's all. So that is why all the rocks, in the exposure, natural exposures appear dark in color, or dark or black in color, let's say. So this is the consequence of decades of, centuries of algal growth. So rock is black. Whereas when you come down from the highest elevation through the slopes, the soil quantity that is resting on the slopes in the valleys or on this either side of the valleys, that quantity becomes larger. And the thickness, that is also what is important. That is where the tree vegetation grows. So obviously, then what about the bare rock covered area? And the bare rock covered area definitely undergoes what is called a chemical weathering, and because of the monsoon climate, and generates soil or soil particles, I should say, by liberating the various minerals in the at the uppermost layer of the rock. So weathering is not a very easy process. In other words, our rocks are dominantly made of quartz and feldspar, roughly 28 to 30% of quartz, and the remainder is feldspar. That is actually 69%. 1% will be the so-called accessory minerals or whatever. What are the accessory minerals? At least in the context of Kerala, our Chavara mineral deposits, black sand deposits, this is what constitutes the accessory mineral. So what is again the time taken for the erosion, soil formation? So finally we have come to the conclusion in the geological community that takes a million years. What is it? A million years to form 1 meter of soil. This is something, this concept is totally elusive to the minds of even our agricultural scientists, unfortunately. So, when the soil reaches the upper end of the valleys, and when it accumulates there, come the next monsoon, a portion of it will start traveling down. And this is what is accumulating in the channel, stream channels, river channels. And what are the important constituents, products of this so-called chemical weathering of the rocks? And one of the most dominating constituent is clay, because all the feldspar, 69% of the feldspar will transform to clay. And clay is a particle, has a particle size of only 2 microns or even less, or 2 and less in size, in diameter. 2 micron or less in diameter. And what is the coarser particle? That is the quartz sand. And remember, if you have 1 cubic meter of rock, on total weathering of it, we get only 28% of quartz sand, which is what is consumed as by the construction industry as a fine aggregate. So this is what is actually filling the river channel. Then there is one more thing we have to think about. During the process of weathering, there are several chemical ions, cations as well as anions, that are also released from the what is called the feldspar and accessories under 1%, which will be available only in solution, which will occur only in solution in the waters. So all the running water during the monsoon or otherwise through the rivers will carry a dissolved load. Then there is what is called a suspended load. The suspended load is the 2 micron or smaller clay particles. Then there is a bed load. Bed load is the coarser material, like a river channel sand that you and I are very familiar. That will travel along the floor of the river channel. And there is a big difference between the load of the river, which is called the bed load on the one hand, and the suspended load, which is the clay particle, and the dissolved load, not just chemical ions. There is a huge difference in the how fast they reach the final destination of the ocean, in our case the Lakshadweep Sea. So what happens is, the bed load of the stream channel sand, after the monsoons we see a lot of sandbars in the river channel. And the best example is what had happened in Sabarimala, whatever that place is, the lower camp, where you have a bridge and the Pamba, Snanam and so on. That area was filled out completely with white sand. That is visible even from the satellite perspective. The new sand is white in color. Where did it come from? Upstream. And did it come alone? No. It came along with the suspended load as well as the dissolved load. So the suspended load and dissolved load are characteristically fast movers. They are in the express lane actually. Every monsoon, after every monsoon season, All the suspended load and the dissolved load derived from the hinterland or the upland will reach the ocean. Whereas the coarser material or the sand grade material, which is derived from the same source, will not reach the ocean. It reaches the ocean finally by several stops and goes. So this part also is not quite well understood to our average citizen or even the specialist engineers. So what has happened during our what is called development of the state after independence. We were all constructing so many things, government buildings and roads, culverts. In other words, the usage of cement was going up. Cement and steel became a very primary input in the development of the infrastructure, whether it is residential, commercial, or transport. And there is what is a Bible-like thing in the Bible-like book in the PWD, which is called the PWD manual. And there is a specification given for all the material that goes into the construction and construction, as well as deconstruction or digging or what have you. So one of the two terms appear there is fine aggregate. And there is another companion term which is called coarse aggregate. Well, coarse aggregate is what we call as metal. What we use as rock, pieces of rock, 25 millimeter in average diameter, in order to make a concrete using cement and sand. And the so-called sand is actually what is called the fine aggregate. And even though there is a mention of coarse aggregate and fine aggregate in the manual, there is no mention of equating fine aggregate with what is called river sand. By conventional wisdom, our builders and contractors, sourced this kind of sand or the fine aggregate from the river channels, which nobody can miss the river channel sand if ever you crossed a river channel, either through a bridge or you just walked or went for a bath. So this became a very important natural resource that are saleable and in great demand in our state. So what had also happened was, with the decentralization of administration, we have had we created, or Kerala has something like close to 100 local self-government governing bodies, or the panchayats, municipalities, etc., or corporations. And as far as the panchayats, etc., are concerned, nearly 1,000 panchayats are concerned. Issuing a permit to a contractor to extract the channel sand was a very important source of revenue to the local self-government, to the concerned panchayat. Well, we have something like 41 rivers flowing westerly, and every panchayat had a lucky resource out of which, without any effort, they get some money. And unfortunately, this has gone in such a scale because of the slowly increasing levels of investment in the construction sector by the government as well as by the citizens. The demand went up very sharply. So whenever the issue of cement came from outside of Kerala. Whenever the issue of coarser aggregate came, it came from the quarries. Hard rock, rubble is broken into smaller pieces by human power and human effort only. It was actually a vocation for the women in many villages, hundreds of villages in Kerala. And that was the source of coarse aggregate. When it came to the fine aggregate, the destination was the river channel only. And so many people got some kind of a temporary job or a seasonal job in collecting the river channel sand. But again, the process went on, probably I would say in a logarithmic proportion. And the ecology of the river channel became dismembered. The faunal diversity reduced terribly, and some of the social activists or ecological activists, they got some kind of a feeling that this kind of removal of sand will lead ultimately to the quote-unquote demise of the river system. And therefore, they filed a class action suit in the High Court of Kerala. And the High Court, after the hearing both sides' arguments, made a decision that all those, all the panchayats, local bodies will have to get some kind of a scientific basis or opinion about the number of tons of sand that can be removed from the channel for which they have a jurisdiction on. So this entitlement of assessment was conferred with the CWRDM in Kozhikode for all the rivers north of Ernakulam, and CESSS for all the rivers south of Ernakulam. So finally what happened, it became a gold mine for these two organizations. Every permit, every request for assessment of mineable or extractable sand had to accompany with a fee of 10,000 rupees. So this is really a huge revenue for these two institutions. And whatever they have done is, I'm not saying it was founded on scientific basis, because they did not address the rate of production of fine aggregate in the source area within the river basin. So this aspect was totally ignored, and as a consequence, they went on issuing permits annual basis, every collecting huge profit, huge fee. I'm not saying it's a profit, because it's an extra revenue for their budget. And then finally what happened? All our rivers went out of sand. There is no river channel sand, and even today, some of the agencies of the government are trying to get to source sand from river channels. The fine aggregate, however, had a different makeup and story now currently in Kerala, and I will go to that in the next episode. Thank you.